I was invited on the Al Jazeera show, The Stream, and then I was told that they did not have space for me on the panel because they were inviting on a former NSA lawyer who was a cybersecurity expert in order to talk about the case, and they felt that the government perspective was essential to include in the program, and so they said no to me. They included Rebecca Vincent, who is a campaign director for Reporters Without Borders. I did an interview with her that was, that was uploaded to the YouTube, to the Shadowproof YouTube. There's also Greg Barnes, who happens to be loosely involved or associated with this Blueprint for Free Speech, this pardon campaign out of Australia. And he was invited to be part of the broadcast. So the Assange perspective was represented, and I don't have any issue with it being one-sided. What I have an issue with is being told that my slot is not going to be available as it was planned because they find that it is more important to include the intelligence perspective in there, and to include someone who is not that much of an expert. In fact, I think that they hyped the knowledge that she has about the Assange case. So even claiming that she knows the way the US government views Julian Assange, no, she identifies with the people who are prosecuting Julian Assange, but that does not make her an expert on what they are doing. Just because I would favor activists and I would reflexively defend the right of people to protest doesn't mean I'm suddenly an expert if people are hit with grand jury subpoenas as activists and swept up in some kind of a fishing expedition. That doesn't suddenly make me somebody who should go to the top of the list as a guest if I have no idea what these people are being prosecuted for. So I've got this queued up, and I would just like to make the case that the show would have been much better if they did not have her on the broadcast. The government perspective, I would say, as it is important. I mean, people need to understand why it's dangerous and what the government is saying and why they're going after Julian Assange, and nobody would dispute that. But I just don't think that she's even the right messenger to articulate that, because I don't think she even knows what's going on in this extradition case. And so let me go ahead and bring this up. I've got a few spots here in this discussion that I want to share. We may go past the hour, but my idea here is that the this part of the show I might clip as my own kind of takedown of what she had to say. And one could argue that she isn't even worth it because it's clear she was a hack, but I just have to make a point for my own dignity that this woman, this national security so-called national security or cybersecurity expert, didn't deserve to be part of this at all. And the stream could have done a far better job trying to find someone. I mean, this is the best they could do. I guess it's good that the government perspective comes from someone who's weak. It means that the show happens, but also the stream's not really built for a debate. Anytime debate looked like it was going to break out, the host has to bring in somebody from the YouTube, or has to bring in some kind of 30-second video that they recorded, or has to do this, or they have the thing with the stream is that they have all kinds of different things happening across platforms, and it's like, we got to get this all crammed in here in 22 minutes, and we've got 3 people, and we've got to we only have like a minute to hear from you, and then somebody wants to respond to the other person, but they really only have like 20 seconds because they've got to get to another video, or they've got to post a tweet, or whatever, and it's kind of sensory overload. So this was the show. I'm bringing this up, so I'm going to go to where this is April Doss, and April Doss is somebody who got ahead of all of this back on April 11th, 2019, when Julian Assange was arrested and expelled. She was part of a group of people who were involved in pushing propaganda about this case being one of hacking and computer crime, criminal activity with computers, rather than journalism. So her first comment wasn't even related to any of the reasons why she was invited on the show. This is the first thing that she said in the broadcast.
For making sure that they are taking into account those very concerns. I would note, I don't think it's clear or certain that what specific conditions of confinement Assange would have if in fact he were extradited. But certainly it would be important if the extradition goes through to make sure that any confinement is carried out in accordance with international norms.
So that's false. She said there that she does not think that we know what specific conditions Julian Assange would be kept in if he was extradited. I followed multiple days during the extradition trial when testimony was put on the record, and the government said its piece about what they thought would happen with Julian Assange, but they also kept it very vague and undefined. And the defense team, Julian Assange's legal team, put a lot of evidence on the record and said that, in fact, we did know, because he's going to be placed under special administrative measures because he's viewed as a national security threat by U.S. intelligence agencies who would lobby the Attorney General to take it seriously and make sure that he doesn't continue to disclose classified information from within a prison cell as he awaits trial, or even after he is convicted. So this woman starts off her answer saying she thinks that it's interesting. Whenever somebody starts their answer with "this is interesting," they don't know. They just don't. They're buying time. But then she says something and pays lip service to the idea that the judge is protecting Julian Assange's rights. But she doesn't care. Again, she's buying time. She's trying to figure out what she's going to say. She should not have been asked about this topic because she has no idea about prison conditions in the United States. She's a former NSA lawyer who knows about cybersecurity, if she even knows about anything. So asking her about how Julian Assange is going to be treated in a prison in the United States is a waste of the viewer's time, because she has nothing meaningful to offer. She doesn't know. And so then, of course, she gave this answer, and people who are watching are saying Rebecca Vincent was awesome. And I'll just keep playing because Rebecca had a great comeback to this.
I'm just looking here at what Stella Morris, who is Julian Assange's partner, have been saying about Belmarsh prison conditions. I'm going to share these with you, Rebecca. I'm sure you've probably seen some of these. Just heard from Julian. It's freezing in his cell. The hot water pipe system in Belmarsh prison broke. He says it's getting really, really cold. We're at a critical juncture. We need to get him out of prison now. Rebecca, thoughts?
I mean, it's appalling. We've seen what he has faced at Belmarsh prison now for some time. And the judge's decision not to release him on bail is at odds with her extradition decision. On Monday, we heard her detail these very mental health issues that will be exacerbated with a prolonged period of detention. She mentioned that it would be worse in the US prison conditions, but actually stated clearly that these issues have been present throughout his period of incarceration at Belmarsh, even with support such as frequent access to his family. We know that he would not be given that in the US. And I'm sorry, but I take issue with April saying we don't know what conditions he will face in the US. We heard days of expert testimony about that in September, about what special administrative measures look like in the US, the inhumane conditions he would face there. He would go to the same facility that Chelsea Manning actually attempted suicide in. We know very well what he will face. This is a highly vulnerable individual. That has also been well documented, and in fact, not even disputed by the prosecution's own medical witness that testified in September, who acknowledged the depression and the suicidal thoughts that Julian Assange has. But I want to take a moment also just to note, there's of course humanitarian urgency for his release. He should be released now for his physical health, for his mental health, but also as a matter of principle, we believe the entire case against him should be dropped. As a matter of principle, he should not be deprived unjustly of his liberty for another day. This case is about journalism. It is about press freedom. And in that regard, we were very disappointed with the substantive portion of the extradition decision, although of course relieved that the decision was against extradition on mental health grounds.
So that's great. That's an amazing answer. That's an excellent response to what April Doss is saying. And then April had a response to Rebecca. So this is why she was brought on the show. This is why the stream thought you all needed to hear her perspective.
April, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is really where I have to push back then. This really isn't about a journalism case. Julian Assange's activities certainly have been in view of the US authorities since 2010. But the indictment itself, although it includes a number of counts, is not focused on speech activities. It's focused on computer crimes as the
All right, I'm gonna stop it right there. It really is focused on speech activities. It's not a true statement to say it's not focused on speech activities. It's the new allegations that were added, which she doesn't talk about at all, are targeting Julian Assange's speeches at so-called hacker conferences or tech conferences, where he went there and he spoke to people, and he is accused of trying to recruit systems administrators or essentially incite them to commit leaks, to engage in unauthorized disclosures, to steal information from the US government. But it's targeting speech for speaking out about the need for transparency and how anyone entering government who's a systems administrator could be in a position to expose criminal wrongdoing or corruption within US government agencies, because they themselves would know because of their work what the government was up to, and so this has become something in which he is a target. Julian Assange speaking out in support of Edward Snowden, that's being targeted. That's a speech activity. And also Julian Assange has been targeted because of the alleged chat that he's alleged to have been a part of with Chelsea Manning when she was a soldier. The alleged speech is that there was a conspiracy to commit a computer crime, that there was an agreement to help Chelsea Manning crack a password. So this is speech. These are speech activities. In fact, almost half, if not a majority of the case, if we're not talking about publication, does go to speech, that they are saying Julian Assange engaged in taking speech and twisting it to give it this kind of nefarious or sinister tinge, as if he's an enemy of the United States that has to be combated. So this is obviously something she's totally blind to, because she identifies with people in US intelligence agencies. So she thinks that naturally everything that comes out of Julian Assange's mouth is looks like a plan to take down the United States' empire. But I must say that most of his speech is all about the act of supporting sources It's about the WikiLeaks organization. It's about how he could protect a source. In this case, if this is in fact Julian Assange in the chat, he is having a conversation with a source, Chelsea Manning, about how he can help her and how he can support Chelsea Manning with the publication of her information and ensure that she isn't identified by the authorities, which is something that journalists do all the time in order to conduct their work. So let me continue here because April, this is about hacking and not journalism. DOS is not finished.
As the primary instigating factor. Now, it's a complicated indictment, and for viewers who may not have read it, there are charges of conspiracy. There are charges of hacking, essentially, unauthorized access.
I'll just say here that the US government wants it to be more complicated than it really is, because they know that if we talk about it in this very basic term of it being a threat to journalism, then they lose. They have to make it complicated. They have to suggest that it's confusing to the public and that people like me aren't talking about it in a accurate manner in order for them to, hem and haw and even get out a word that might make their side look like it has any leg to stand on.
Access to computers or exceeding authorized access to computers, both attempts alleged by Assange himself and attempts that he allegedly encouraged others to make. And then there's charges relating to publication of classified defense material.
I'm going to go back because I've cut up her sentence, and I want to make sure people are able to get where we are in her answer. But she's referring to these allegations that were added of Julian Assange inciting or encouraging hacking. They added some allegation related to LulzSec, and they bring in Sabu, and they bring in a disgraceful person who was convicted of charges involving pedophilia. And this is the minor or the teenager who is not named in the indictment, the latest version, but we know it's Ziggy. And there's a lot we could say about that individual, which April Doss is clearly ignorant of as she talks about this part of the case. But we didn't get any specifics in the extradition trial about this hacking that she's talking about, this encouraging of hacking. And I think we should just presume that she doesn't really even know this part of the case, and she might have some basic knowledge of the alleged computer crime, but she's also misconstruing that conspiracy to commit a computer crime. So I'll just pull this back a little bit and let's keep listening.
It's a complicated indictment, and for viewers who may not have read it, there are charges of conspiracy. There are charges of hacking, essentially, unauthorized access to computers or exceeding authorized access to computers, both attempts alleged by Assange himself and attempts that he allegedly encouraged others to make. And then there's charges relating to publication of classified defense material. From a U.S. freedom of speech perspective, the press protections in the US fall broadly within the First Amendment to the Constitution. And the charges relating to publication of defense information are the ones that have caused many First Amendment scholars in the US to, sort of look sideways at it and say, is this really, sort of an untested area to go down? However, it has always been the case that journalists don't get a free pass for breaking the law. And so while WikiLeaks may have been founded with the intention of publishing information, as news reporting organizations do around the world, if in fact Assange was involved either in attempting himself or encouraging others to attempt hacking into computers, that's a crime. And that's what he's been charged with in this indictment. And so the physical world corollary.
Actually, she's wrong, because there are no charges of him encouraging people to hack. Those are just allegations that have been added as gloss. And again, she's not even talking about those specifically. So I assume that she is still talking in vague terms about the conspiracy to commit a computer crime, which is the charge of him and what he allegedly said in a chat with Chelsea Manning. She gives lip service to the press freedom protections or the First Amendment protections in the United States. She's not saying anything, though, about how prosecutors have taken this position that Julian Assange may not be able to have First Amendment rights in the United States. It's a position that Mike Pompeo, you can go back to the beginning of our show, Mike, who needs a safe space, Pompeo, has said that, in fact, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange do not have First Amendment rights because these people are not Americans. So he thinks that they should not be granted these constitutional protections for their work as members of the press. And anyways, I don't think she really understands what she's talking about.
To this, right, is that reporters have long published information that was obtained from confidential sources in hard copy, for example, out of a government office or a corporate office or something like that. The reporters typically do and should have protection for publishing information that has been provided to them. However, a reporter who breaks into an office and steals files out of a file cabinet certainly can be charged with the crime of breaking and entering and theft. And that's essentially what this U.S. indictment attempts to do, is focus on the computer crime dimension of it. And that's what's at the heart of the allegations.
Except Julian Assange did not break into any computer. And in fact, Chelsea Manning did not break into any computers. And the fact of the matter is that Chelsea Manning had access to all of this material, and there was nothing for her to break into. And so this is completely incorrect for her to act like this is analogous to a reporter entering an office and stealing files, because Julian Assange wasn't in the Pentagon system. And so this is not even similar. It's not identical at all. So why this woman is considered an expert, why this cybersecurity expert, and I keep saying woman, I would just say man if she was a man. I'm not trying to gender this, just to be clear here. Why this cybersecurity expert was not was invited to be part of this program is absolutely nuts. The idea that there wasn't anybody else who could articulate what the government is doing in this case and present a perspective. I don't think anybody was able to take away anything of value from April Doss participating in this conversation. I'll just point out to you that I've done some coverage of this. So like her position is that the takeaway from this case is journalism is not a crime, but hacking is. That's the quote she gave to USA Today on the day that Julian Assange was arrested. And she did a kind of media blitz, getting her name out there as a voice who could defend the Assange indictment. And this was always far-fetched. Anyone like April Doss, who argued that this was not about journalism, could have just opened up the indictment. I mean, she's either deliberately lying or she's being willfully ignorant. And in either case, that should disqualify you from being an expert who comes on shows and talks about this. So she's outed herself as a hack, because if you look at the indictment and you read through it, there's charges. There's one charge that specifically criminalizes Assange for allegedly knowing Manning had made unauthorized disclosures of classified information to WikiLeaks. That charge is the computer crime charge. It says that basically Assange should have rejected the documents from Chelsea Manning because at the time, the government argues he knew Chelsea Manning was breaking the law. So this is from the indictment. Assange knew that Manning was unlawfully taking and disclosing them, and at the time, Assange agreed to assist Manning in cracking the encrypted password hash. Assange knew that Manning was taking and illegally providing WikiLeaks with classified documents and records containing national defense information from classified databases. And if you look at this language, and April Doss is a lawyer, this is directly from the Espionage Act. It's not language from any law against computer crimes or defrauding the U.S. government. The Espionage Act refers to national defense information. It refers to receiving it, knowing that Manning was unlawfully taking and disclosing it, and so this was a signal that the charge implicated journalism, and you notice in her commentary that she gives for the stream, she never says the word Espionage Act. She's never talking about the law itself that makes this such a unprecedented case. I point out in my coverage that in the indictment, FBI Special Agent Megan Brown is referenced. She was assigned to the counter espionage squad at the Washington field office in the District of Columbia, and she put together an affidavit that was submitted on the computer crime charge, and the charge was revolved around the publication of the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs. The affidavit confirmed that the Justice Department was alleging a computer crime as a way of targeting the publication of information that exposed evidence relating to U.S. torture and war crimes. So we know that this charge did in fact involve journalism. It involves journalism. It doesn't involve hacking. It's about journalism. The hacking is the veneer in which the U.S. government has tried to sell people on this case not being one that endangers press freedom. So I think I've belabored the point, but April Doss is not an expert on Assange, not an expert on WikiLeaks, not somebody who has even a remote understanding of this case. You can go look her up, April Doss, April Doss, and you cannot find any articles from her, any columns written about this. Remember, Julian Assange was expelled and arrested in April 2019, and she wrote and she commented on this case in April, but then when the Espionage Act charges hit in May, where was she? She didn't have anything to say. Why? Because those charges undermined her entire argument about this being a case against hacking. Now it was clearly about going after a journalist. So she disappears, and she's off doing whatever for her law firm and herself. And so what happens the rest of the way during 2019 and then 2020 when we have the extradition proceedings and the extradition trial, she's nowhere. She's not giving comments to any publication. You can't find her. I went and looked. I tried to see what made her an expert on this. The only time that she commented was on the computer crime charge. And so for the stream to invite her, it's as if the viewers are supposed to believe that this case has not progressed and that we are still at the stage of the case where it was in April of 2019 when there was only one single charge against Julian Assange. But we are much farther along. There is a lot that has happened, and the fact is that she doesn't know anything, and the only thing that makes her someone who can speak on this is because she identifies with the prosecutors who are going after Assange, who would like to see him, or who some of them would like to see him, but they're perfectly fine with Julian Assange dying in a prison cell or being put behind bars for the rest of his life because they loathe and despise WikiLeaks that much. So that's why she got that slot. So anyways, again, like, I may be accused of throwing a kind of tantrum, but it's a little bit about dignity here. It's about knowing that I think I could articulate the government perspective better than April Doss can articulate the government perspective, because I at least attack the government on the merits of their argument, which they really don't have much of one, but I understand what they're trying to do to Julian Assange fully, and I can place it into a context. And if you listen to April Doss, she has a very limited understanding. And I use understanding reluctantly because I don't have another word on the tip of my tongue for what she had to say.